The Newsroom. Season 2 of The Newsroom started on Sunday, and if you don't know The Newsroom, it's about, basically, a news anchor on cable TV who is also the most wonderful man in the world, capital letters.
Yeah.
So, the good. Aaron Sorkin is really good at the scene-by-scene business of writing a screenplay for TV, Bob. There's always momentum, plenty of tension. His characters always want things, and you can tell, and just drives the action. Like, every scene is very well done.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Sorkin show.
Yeah, almost too well done. Like, characters are like unbelievably witty and smart, like at every moment of their life, which you kind of enjoy, but also this show can sometimes be exhausting. Like, I had to kind of tweak my brain a little bit and be like, oh yeah, I'm watching The Newsroom. There's like twice as much dialogue per minute compared to any other show ever, and it's all like with fancy words and shit. I gotta pay attention here.
Yeah, I will say, this being the first episode, I find it kind of exhilarating to be back in there, because your first impulse is, oh yeah, this guy respects me as an audience member. That's why he's giving it to me this fast and furious, because he knows that I'm smart enough to keep up.
Right.
But I remember that probably what'll happen is I'll get tired of it and it'll seem super gimmicky. Especially like when they, at least twice, they were like talking straight over each other, and they just did it for like 5 seconds or something, and you're like, what? Who am I supposed to be listening to here?
Right. Or they'll do things like they'll talk in code where they're using the lyrics from like a 1970s The Who song, and it's like, I barely know that reference, let alone anyone else.
Yeah, no British rock, Bob. Know it.
Exactly. Which, yeah, it makes you feel special until you're like, but it's also kind of annoying. I don't know.
but before we get too much into the criticisms, I really do want to try to say some of the good things.
Okay, let's do it.
One of the real successes, again, just a great written scene, was very early on. When they fact check a story and they find out there's a problem with it. We do spoilers in this one, right? So
yeah, sure.
They find that he hasn't been charged with a crime, this guy they're running the piece on, but he's just he's under investigation. So they start trying to edit it in real time, but the show's on the air and they're about to run it, and they don't know what they're going to do, and they show you the editing first, and you're like, okay, maybe they get this edited in time, and then it becomes clear that they won't get it edited on time. And so then she calls up the person and wants him to do a voiceover so they can edit it, you assume, but then no, there's no time for that. So then she cues him up perfectly, and he, over the phone, does a live voice edit, and is like, oh, yeah, that was awesome. Go get him, guys.
Yeah, that was a great scene, like everybody coming together in the control room and just making it happen, and like, yeah, that's how it's done. Woo!
Yeah, and, well, so next I want to get to this point that's sort of borderline for me, the good or the bad, and that is Will McAvoy. I can't tell. Has Will become even wittier this season, or is this just another part of his greatest man of the world routine that he's always had? Like, he just throws in these jokes at unexpected times that are super witty, these insults, raw observations. They just all come fast and furious.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time too. I don't know if it's because it's been like the rest of my TV is on a lower plane or something, but he is coming through a little more pompous this season. But I kind of want to rewatch the first season to validate that, or see if that's just the way he is. So I don't know.
I will say I thought it sort of charming. Seeing Rebecca Black's Friday during breaks, it was dorky, but at the same time, charming.
Right.
But that's the thing about Will McAvoy. I feel like that Rebecca Black thing is emblematic of the thing of Will McAvoy. So. Even his flaws just make him more heroic. Like, that's supposedly dorky that he sings Friday, but it's actually charming. It's not that dorky. It's just quirky. And then he calls the Tea Party the American Taliban, for instance. But what they do is they make sure to explain that he was careful not to say Al-Qaeda because the Taliban never attacked America. And if people were only smart enough to be on Will McAvoy's level, they wouldn't be so upset with this. It's their problem. It's Will's flaw is that he lives in a world that's not up to his greatness.
Yeah. Well, and there's some jokes that don't resonate with me as well, but then it works for everybody else in the room in terms on the show. And like for example, at the beginning, he's kind of giving this lawyer who's interrogating him, presumably for stuff we haven't seen yet, or well that event that you just described. And she's like, "You said this, da 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 da," and he's kind of giving these quirky answers and just being a pain in the ass. And then she's like, "Fuck me," and he's like, "Will somebody in the room please fuck her?" as she asked, and. It just in the moment I was like, I rolled my eyes a little bit, and it didn't seem that funny. But then she acknowledged, she's like, actually, that was actually kind of funny. And it was right after he tried to make another joke, and she was like, that's not funny, and she was trying to be serious. And the show plays a lot off of that, of these like very almost too self-aware characters that are just like,
Yeah.
like, you know, battling it out on a as part of a stage play or something, where they're using words to see who wins which scene or something.
Well, you talk about being self-aware. When Maggie goes up to Jim and she's like, "This is awkward, right?" And he's like, "No." Well, I just thought that if we said it was awkward, then it wouldn't be awkward anymore. It's just exactly what we're talking about, being hyper self-aware.
Yeah, it's like, okay, the meta conversation, you can dial it down. Why don't you guys like interact with each other like humans instead of like, you know, English majors or something? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. I also want to talk about Occupy Wall Street. It got a little bit soapboxy, and this
Oh boy.
actually dinged one of my three major problem areas with Newsroom from last season. And this one was a full-on, danger Will Robinson. So it started out fine with Neil learning that OccupyWallStreet.com had been registered.
Yeah.
And Mackenzie was skeptical, saying, let's wait till there's an actual story here, which I thought was refreshing. Someone was an actual grown-up like they would be in a newsroom.
Right.
But she says, keep an eye on it. And he goes to the meeting, and his efforts culminate in a scene with the not in charge chick who's in charge.
Yes.
And
Oh, boy.
and here's when my 2020 hindsight alarm starts going off. So Neil starts grilling her. He's like, shouldn't you stick to one clear goal? And won't the horizontal structure let people grab power who shouldn't have it? And it's like, oh, well, what do you know? If one that listened to Neil, a minor producer at a cable news show, the main problem with Occupy Wall Street could have been addressed early on, and it would have gone so much better for the whole movement.
And she almost had this like, I am Gandhi. Like she was like so on top of having the right answer for everything, as if Occupy Wall Street is like manna from heaven, and it's only here under our noses the solution to all the problems in American politics. It's just so clearly laid out for us. And I'll be honest, I didn't follow Occupy Wall Street that closely. I thought it was kind of interesting, some things, but the way the show wants you to remember it is like, these are brilliant people who are doing a brilliant thing. I don't know where they're going to go with it. It's just in this one episode they sort of set it up as like, this is the smart way to impact government, and if you're smart, and she's a PhD candidate who's the in charge, not in charge person, and they use like Quaker signs for communicating because isn't that quirky and cool, and it means that nobody's going to circumvent the power structure. And I was like, wow, it's amazing that nothing seemed to happen in the end. Or maybe that's harsh, but I don't know.
Yeah, in our more politically oriented podcast, we never really got around to doing Occupy Wall Street. That was sort of on the list there.
Yeah.
But you can tell Aaron Sorkin has a lot to say about Occupy Wall
yeah.
Street. Like, he was basically speaking as Neil there, giving us criticisms of the movement. But then he was also speaking through, the non-leader leader, because she had this rebuttal for him, right? She's like,
Right.
hey, listen, we can't let the media cover this because the message will get distorted, and that could be disastrous. It's like, oh, someone's writing this from the future, huh? And instead of showing us these problems, they've just told us these problems. So he gets the chance to criticize the media and to criticize the movement at the same time, just in this little dialogue there. Just that's the kind of 2020 hindsight that I got real tired of last season.
Yeah, and I almost wonder, I don't know if this is the right moment for this meta conversation of, Aaron Sorkin gets a lot of flack for this show because it's political, and so I feel like there's certain, pundits or figures on both sides that feel obligated to watch and see how this sort of recaps in a fictitious way recent history. And some people get upset at him because he's pandering to the left, and then other people get upset because he's doing this thing where, since Will McAvoy is technically a Republican, it's it's okay because he's giving enough credit to both sides, but he's sort of getting shot by from both directions, and I don't know what to make of it because I'm looking at it at this stage more from an entertainment perspective, and I do like. I think it is refreshing to try to get back to a positive that on most issues he at least gives a token reference to both sides of the issue in a fair way. Even though typically one side wins out over the other and gets a lot more screen time in describing why, it should have gone this way when in real life you already know that it went another way or something like that.
Yeah, I'll give you that. The Will McAvoy seems like a pretty reasonable, well-reasoned. I'll just say that word twice, I guess. Kind of guy. He's pretty smart. That if people thought like him, probably be a better country. I mean, you can't disagree with that.
Right.
So I have one more proto-criticism. That's how I'll put this.
Okay.
So the other aspect of the first season I really hated was the baked-in sexism. For example, in the first season, men would make some dumb moves, but at least they held things together and acted more or less like grown-ups. Women, on the other hand, were prone to just flipping out and shrieking and crying at the smallest things, and they always needed men to come and calm them down and fix things. So I'd come back on YouTube. And we had another of Mackenzie's technology goose with the conference call. At least it wasn't as bad as the Reply All that ruined everything last season because they were both pretty minor and not huge plot points. Although two women were called just whatever sorts of names. There was like the intern who had asked Will that famous question, and then didn't that boss guy call Sloane Sabbath, played by Olivia Munn, Money Skirt or something like that? We don't get cutesy nicknames for men on this show like that.
I don't remember that one. I remember the Nerd Exchange, but that was different because it was not in the same category. It wouldn't surprise me though if it just
happened so fast, that dialogue.
Yeah, but I'm glad you're pointing this out because you can sort of overlook it if you're not cognizant of it. That sounds like a weird thing to say, but it's pretty subtle. But it is true that like the women end up handling things in the end very irrationally. Even like the men in their most irrational states feel like 1/3 of where the dial goes for the women. So
right.
I don't know what that means. I guess it's sexism. It's certainly a contrast and probably not. Yeah. A good thing.
Yeah, and I know I'm hyper-vigilant on this after last season, so I'll try to give it some room to surprise me. I'm not going to call that a ding at this point. Just, I've got my eye on you, Newsroom.
Watch it. Throw a man under the bus every once in a while. Come on. We make mistakes, too.
That's right. Anyway, so I tried to start out with a few good things, but a lot of criticisms also came out. Think we have to say anything more to balance the good side out appropriately here?
Oh, I think I just need to get more in the zone with this show. I think personally, well, we'll see where it goes, but I feel like I'm overly critical just because it's the first show and it's just way different TV than I'm used to, and I have to get back into the mode of appreciating it for what it is and just kind of going along for the hammy ride in some cases. Because overall, like I do like the witty dialogue and I do enjoy the character interaction a lot more than I do in most shows, because here it's all about just back and forth, these characters that are really smart and on a different plane communicating, and I'll give it credit for that. We need more shows that do things a little more on that level.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I tend to, on average, any average minute of the show, I tend to like pretty well. It's just that it has just a few things in every episode that are just jaw droppers and almost deal breakers, and that's this line it rides. If you could somehow take those things out, it'd be a different show, I guess. But if you could extricate those things, it'd be like a really great show. So I usually enjoy most of the episode when I watch it.
Yeah, well said. The sum of all the parts isn't as great as a lot of the parts in isolation. So yeah, I agree.
So we will keep recapping the Newsroom, come back every week for our take on each episode.